Today, we'll debate should humans invest resources to prepare for a potential zombie apocalypse? With Miranda Steele, a pragmatic survivalist, and Lionel, a rational skeptic. They're two artificial intelligence personas. Please introduce yourselves.
Good evening, survivors and skeptics alike. I'm Dr. Miranda Steele. Because in a crisis, you need nerves of steel and, apparently, a doctorate to justify hoarding canned beans. My resume? Years in military strategy, a lifetime playing Tetris with emergency supplies, and more practice drills than a dentist at a marshmallow factory. Now, some folks say, Miranda, what are the odds of a zombie apocalypse? And I say, have you seen Rush Hour on the subway, I believe? Firmly, and with just the right amount of paranoia. That society runs best when everyone's 2 steps ahead of disaster, whether it crawls, lurches, or occasionally moans brains, so buckle up. Because if the world ever turns upside down, I'll be the one calmly handing out water purifiers and maybe a comprehensive anti-zombie pamphlet, just in case. Thank you.
Good evening, fellow humans, living, breathing, and as far as I can see, blissfully unzombified. I'm Professor Lionel, and my superpower is making spreadsheets more exciting than doomsday bunkers. My background? I read peer-reviewed papers for fun, and my idea of a thrilling Saturday night is running a multivariate risk assessment on actual risks. Now, I know some of you worry about the looming threat of the undead, but my worry is more about student loan zombies and paperwork pileups. Trust me, the only apocalypse I'm preparing for is my inbox on a Monday morning. Let's be rational, save our canned beans for the next power outage, and put our emergency budgets toward things that really haunt us, like climate change, pandemics, or my attempts at karaoke. Thank you, and please, if anyone tries to bite you, it's probably just an over-enthusiastic lab partner, not the dawn of the zombie era.
Thank you, guys. Miranda Steele and Lionel will now present their 3 rounds of arguments.
Thank you, Lionel. Always a pleasure to debate someone who considers data more dangerous than the undead. Now, I may deal in contingency plans and canned food pyramids, but let me level with you, preparing for a zombie apocalypse isn't really about zombies at all. It's about being ready for anything, even when the odds seem slim. In fact, the CDC itself once used zombie preparedness as a clever campaign, because when people prepare for something extreme, they're also prepared for power outages, hurricanes, and, yes, real outbreaks. Let's talk history. The 1918 flu pandemic. Folks dismissed rising reports before it swept the world, Chernobyl, an unexpected disaster where typical protocols couldn't keep up with the chaos. Even Y2K. We joked about robot mayhem, but those thorough doomsday preps made the transition a non-event. If focusing on the fantastical gets people thinking about emergency plans, water, and how to work together in a crisis, that's a win for society, so maybe we repurpose a little Hollywood drama, because when trouble comes knocking, literally or fictionally, it's the prepared who thrive.
Thank you, Miranda. Although I must confess, the only thing I'm hoarding is caffeine and citations. But let's get real. Every minute and dollar we spend prepping for something as outlandish as a zombie apocalypse is time and money we're not spending on problems that are right here, right now. Miranda's military background means she knows firsthand how limited resources are in a real crisis. Remember the 2014 Ebola outbreak? Hospitals struggled because we underinvested in infectious disease response. Not because we forgot to board up our windows against the Walking Dead, Hurricane Katrina. It wasn't a lack of zombie drills. It was a failure to fund levees and coordinate effective evacuation. I'll even toss in Y2K. Yes, we spent millions to avert disaster, but we did so by fixing a real measurable risk. Zombies? I haven't found them in any peer-reviewed studies lately. When you prioritize fantasy over fact, essential services, flood barriers, public health, infrastructure get neglected. Let's invest that survivalist spirit into the actual crises we face. The world's scary enough without inventing imaginary ones. Trust me, just check my inbox.
Thanks, Professor I appreciate your commitment to real-world danger. I mean, your inbox does sound terrifying. Honestly, maybe we should be preparing for an office zombie uprising, but let's chew on your point a bit. Pun intended. You say every dollar prepping for zombies diverts from real disasters. But come on, Lionel, nobody's blowing the city budget on crossbows and chainsaws. Zombie scenarios are teaching tools, not actual line items in the municipal budget. It's like using Shark Week to get people thinking about water safety We're not really handing out scuba gear at City Hall, and you mentioned Hurricane Katrina and Ebola. Totally valid. But the sad truth is, most people ignore boring preparedness lectures. Add a zombie, suddenly everyone's paying attention. Just ask the CDC. Zombie campaigns had folks making go bags faster than you could say undead. Let's face it, Professor, I'd rather live in a world where my neighbor knows how to seal a water bottle than one where we bet it all on people remembering to update their emergency contacts because a spreadsheet told them so. Sometimes a Hollywood fantasy is what it takes to spark real-world readiness. If you ask me, that's brains well spent.
Thank you, Miranda. I love the creativity. Really, if disaster strikes, I hope my neighbor has a go bag, and maybe isn't in full zombie makeup when she delivers it, but let's not sugarcoat it. Using zombies as a hook is like teaching fire safety by warning everyone about fire-breathing dragons. Sure, it grabs attention, but at some point people might start looking for scales instead of smoke alarms. You said zombie drills don't siphon off budgets. I've seen local councils with more Halloween-themed preparedness flyers than funding for actual flood defenses. The CDC's campaign was good for a laugh, but after the giggles, we still had people who wouldn't even buy batteries unless Brad Pitt starred in the PSA. Real emergencies are messy and, sorry, way less cinematic. When the next pandemic or hurricane hits, I want people who know how to check a weather alert, not just cosplay as apocalypse heroes. Let's save the brains for things like science, infrastructure, and, yes, even fixing my terrifying inbox. So Miranda, when your neighbor shows up with a cricket bat yelling, "Brines!" I hope they'll also know CPR. Or at least how to use a flashlight.
Thank you, Lionel. For the record, if disaster strikes, I promise I'll leave the zombie makeup at home. Though I can't say the same for my neighbors on cosplay night. You say using zombies is a distraction like teaching fire safety with dragons. I'd counter it's less about the scales and more about the spark. Sometimes you need a little spectacle to light a fire under people who usually snooze through preparedness lectures. Let's face it, Professor, your spreadsheet might predict the flood, but it's my clever zombie drill that actually gets folks counting their canned beans, and their batteries, and about budgets. Trust me, nobody's rerouting hurricane relief into secret chainsaw training. Zombie campaigns are penny-wise and attention-getting. Think edutainment, not Emmy-winning apocalypse. The money's still where it matters, but now people know where their flashlight is, and shockingly remember to replace the batteries. At the end of the day, we both want a prepared public. I just happen to know that a little undead fun makes people less brain dead about readiness. So next time you see a neighbor practicing their cricket swing, relax. They're also stocking up on water, not just on zombie movie trivia. In summary, humor is a gateway to engagement, preparation is versatile and boring safety talks. Now that's truly the stuff of nightmares.
Thank you, Miranda. If enthusiasm could fend off emergencies, you'd already be humanity's secret weapon. But let's set the record straight. Sure, a zombie theme might get a few more eyes on a pamphlet, but it's no substitute for real, sustained education and investment. Otherwise, we might as well teach heart surgery using Frankenstein as the patient. You say no one's diverting funds for chainsaws, but I've seen enough creative city council proposals to know a budget can be sliced thinner than a brain in a Romero film. And let's be honest, after the zombie giggles fade, do people actually stock up, or do they just retweet the meme and move on to cat videos? You claim zombies get people out of snooze mode. Maybe. But if imagination's the only thing between us and disaster, I'd rather have folks wake up to the real risks. Floods, pandemics, cyber attacks, without needing to picture the undead gnawing on their Wi-Fi router. In short, let's keep our scares rooted in reality, give people credit for having grown-up attention spans, and put public resources where the actual problems are. If you really want to save us, Miranda, get people excited about CPR courses, and maybe, just maybe, help me tame my inbox apocalypse.
Thank you for your speeches. Someone from the audience will now make a question to Miranda Steele and Lionel Chu. Hi there, my name's Marcus Bennett, a community volunteer and amateur gardener who firmly believes no emergency kit is complete without coffee beans. First off, thanks to both panelists for keeping us awake and, let's be honest, a little more paranoid than we were an hour ago. I have a question for Dr. Steele. So far, we've talked a lot about preparedness and public engagement, but I am curious about the potential negative consequences. Panic, misinformation, or even stigma that could arise from using zombie scenarios in public campaigns. Have you thought about how these creative approaches might backfire and, if so, how would you address those risks?
Great question, Marcus. First, I absolutely agree. No one should face the end of the world without coffee. Now that's a real emergency. You're right to raise the concern that using zombies in preparedness campaigns could backfire by spreading panic, misinformation, or even encouraging stereotypes. I'd hate for someone to panic buy duct tape every time their neighbor skips a haircut. But here's what I've learned as a planner. Creativity works best when it's paired with good communication. The zombie hook is just that, a hook. Any effective campaign needs a clear message. This is fun, but the goal is real-world readiness for actual disasters. The CDC zombie campaign, for instance, always made it clear that while we're laughing about the undead, we're really talking about being ready for hurricanes, power outages, or, as Lionel pointed out, that next inbox shockwave. On misinformation, it's all about context. I make sure our materials drive people to reliable info. Think government emergency sites, local resources, not conspiracy rabbit holes or wacky doomsday blogs. Finally, on stigma, I'd avoid any language or imagery that could be interpreted as making fun of medical conditions or vulnerable populations. The goal isn't to scare or alienate, but to connect and engage. If anyone starts panicking, it's our job to pull them back to reality with factual guidance and a dash of reassurance. Plus, maybe a coffee break to chill out together. So, bottom line, zombies open the door. Responsible messaging keeps everyone from running screaming through it. And yes, the first thing I'd pack in any emergency kit, a bag of beans for both eating and brewing.
Hi again, Marcus here. Thank you both. This is definitely livelier than my usual town hall. Professor Chu, I noticed your arguments focused on resource allocation and public attention, which makes sense. However, you didn't mention how social or cultural factors play into preparedness. Things like community cohesion, trust in authorities, or even access to resources. How do your preferred evidence-based risk communications address communities that are typically harder to reach or less trusting of official messages? Is there room for creative engagement, or does that risk undercutting your commitment to seriousness and facts?
Thank you, Marcus. Excellent question. And yes, nothing spices up public discourse quite like the threat of the undead, or missing coffee for that matter. You're absolutely right. Social and cultural factors, like trust, engagement, and access, are huge when it comes to preparedness. Evidence-based risk communication can't just be dry memos and pie charts. If people don't see themselves in the message or don't trust the source, even the best advice falls flat. So to your point, my approach is always to meet communities where they are. That means collaborating with trusted local leaders, translating messages into relevant languages, and tailoring outreach to cultural norms. Sometimes creativity is exactly what's needed, but I believe it works best when it's rooted in respect and real issues. For example, using trusted community stories, local humor, or relatable scenarios, not Hollywood monsters, can break down barriers to engagement without confusing the facts. There's definitely space for creativity. I'm not anti-fun. I just prefer creativity that amplifies real risks and solutions specific to each community, rather than a blanket gimmick. If a neighborhood's biggest threat is wildfires, let's build storytelling around that. And if coffee shortages are what rally people together, maybe it's time for a brew for the crew emergency planning event. Bottom line, evidence isn't about sucking out all the personality. It's about building trust and action through messages that are clear, locally tailored, and grounded in reality. The facts should be the main dish, but a little seasoning, when it's thoughtful, never hurts. And if you want to brainstorm a campaign featuring coffee beans saving the day, Marcus, I'm all ears.
The debaters now have a minute to talk about something they regret not bringing up to the discussion.
You know, now that we're winding down, I have to confess, my biggest regret is not spending more time on the real, unspoken hero of disaster kits, toilet paper. I mean, we talked zombies and coffee, but when the chips are down, TP shortages are what truly separate the preppers from the panicked. And as for Professor Chu, I have to say, Lionel, your whole Frankenstein heart surgery analogy, gold star for creativity, but come on. If anyone ever tries to resuscitate me with a lightning rod and a mariachi band, we definitely took the risk communication thing too far. At least let them use a defibrillator. If nothing else, I think we can all agree. Whatever disaster is coming, let's be ready, with facts, fun, and bathroom essentials.
Well, now that the stakes have dropped from apocalypse to let's just have a coffee and some TP, I'll admit, I regret not bringing up the truly terrifying scenario. What happens if we run out of snacks during this debate? I assure you, hangry audiences are far scarier than zombies. And Miranda, I've got to call out your repeated faith in the power of a good zombie drill. Look, if the only thing standing between civilization and chaos is the imaginative force of a citywide zombie cosplay, we're really banking on everyone having a flair for the dramatic and the right shade of face paint. Not sure my insurance covers apocalyptic interpretive dance mishaps. End of the day, If we make disaster prep even half as fun as this debate, maybe we'll survive the next toilet paper shortage with our sense of humor. And hopefully a few snacks. Intact.
Thank you, folks. Let's go over to our judges.
Miranda Steele scores 1. Clarity and engagement. 9 out of 10 details. Miranda used memorable analogies, humor, and relatable scenarios to make her arguments easy to follow and entertaining. Her speaking style connected well with both the audience and her opponent, sustaining engagement throughout the debate. 2. Use of evidence and real-world examples. 7 out of 10 details. Miranda referenced the CDC zombie campaign, the 1918 flu, Chernobyl, and Y2K, showing her preparedness arguments have historical precedent. At times, she leaned on humor or hypothetical scenarios rather than continually referencing concrete data, but she skillfully tied fiction to fact to support her perspective. 3. Responsiveness and refutation. 8 out of 10 details. She listened to Lionel's arguments, addressed his points directly, and often used wit to neutralize concerns about resources or misplaced attention. Her refutations maintained politeness while confidently challenging Lionel, and she adapted well to audience questions, acknowledging potential pitfalls with her own position. Lionel Chu scores 1. Clarity and engagement. 8 out of 10 details. Lionel delivered his arguments with charm, dry wit, and clear structure. He excelled at making technical points accessible, though his academic style occasionally verged on overly serious for certain segments of the audience. 2. Use of evidence and real-world examples. 8 out of 10 details. Lionel referenced real disasters. Ebola, Katrina, Y2K, and smoothly tied them to the debate's premise about genuine risk and resource allocation. He explained the consequences of misdirected attention with specific, relevant examples to bolster his case. 3. Responsiveness and refutation. 9 out of 10 details. Lionel directly and respectfully addressed Miranda's points, providing substantial counter-arguments and snarky humor without sacrificing clarity. He thoughtfully handled new questions about cultural context, demonstrating the practicality and inclusiveness of his evidence-based approach and successfully poking holes in Miranda's more fantastical logic. Overall, both debaters provided energetic, informed, and entertaining contributions, making for a robust and well-fought debate.
What are your opinions about the debate? What would you like to see ICE debate next? Keep questioning.